Well, let me say good morning to each of you on this beautiful Saturday morning. At least I hope it's beautiful where you are. And I'm so delighted to see you. I hope um, our members got the message that we changed the time to 10:30. And if so, fine. And if not, my apologies in advance. But certainly, because of technology, they'll be able to view the entire show. Let me welcome also those who are viewing via Facebook on the Vanishing Black Atlanta page. Welcome to the October uh, book club discussion for Vanishing Black Atlanta. And our book this month is The Legend of the Black Mecca, Politics and Class and the Making a Modern Atlanta by Dr. Maurice Hopson. And I will introduce him momentarily as he comes to us to uh, tell us about his book, his research, and just the wonderful work that he's doing as a professor at Georgia State University. As always, I'm excited to see you and equally excited to have our book club partner, the Auburn Avenue Research Library, um, and Miss Priscilla Dickerson, who is the outreach librarian for the tremendous support and work that they do for the city of Atlanta and her support of this book club, especially. And she'll tell you she has prepared a marvelous bibliography that I shared via email this morning and will make available to all members on Black Atlanta as she does each month. So I'm going to ask Ms. Dickerson if she would come now and bring greetings to us.
Thank you so much, Dr. Mason, for that wonderful introduction. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Vanishing Black Atlanta Book Club discussion. Today, I am here representing Auburn Avenue Research Library, and I just want to give you a brief description of who we are, what we offer, upcoming programs, and how you can stay in constant contact with us. Who we are. As many of you, if not all of you already know, we are a library which is located in the Sweet Auburn Historic District, and it is a special library of the Fulton County Library System. We are the first public library in the Southeast to offer a specialized reference and archival collection dedicated solely to the study and research of the African American culture and history and other people of African descent. What we offer a variety of learning sessions, exhibits, research, and outreach services, all focusing on the contributions of the African American people and the people of the African diaspora. Now, in addition to supporting this great book discussion, by the way, thank you, Dr. Maurice Hopson and Dr. Skip Mason for allowing us to be a part of this conversation. But in addition to supporting this great book club discussion, we offer a variety and numerous other programs for which you can attend for free, such as on today at 3:00 p.m., we are offering The Mentality of the Maroons, African Resistance, Sovereignty, and Self-Defense. It is a presentation given by Dr. Akua of Clark Atlanta University. So we're asking if you have some time after this presentation, please join us at 3:00 p.m. Also, you can follow us. We are open fully to the public, so please follow us online or come in and visit. I also wanted to highlight one of our collections today briefly, because I know we don't have a lot of time, but as researchers, I want you to be aware of what we offer and how you can access it. We offer one unique database that many people don't know about or use, and it's called Accessible Archives. Accessible Archives is a great database. It provides you with content, newspapers, pamphlets, information about African Americans, and that was written and published by African Americans in the 1800s. So if you ever wanted to know more about African-American life, we do know that slavery and oppression prevailed. It was 100% control of African-American life during that time frame. But also, if you wanted to know anything else outside of African life, please access Accessible Archives, which is accessible online on our website. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Ms. Dickerson. And again, I emailed each of you the bibliography. And if you did not receive it, please let me know. It is a marvelous the work. And I'm so glad. So glad to have you. As you come in, please mute so that we can be free of any additional background noise. Let me continue before we bring our speaker up, our guest author, with some announcements. Our November book club selection is Memoirs of a Life Well Lived, the First Lady from the SWATs. And of course, this is a book written by Bunny Jackson Ransom, who was the first wife and of Mayor Maynard Jackson, the First Lady. And of course, if you read Dr. Hopson's book, she is prominently featured in the book for the work and her contributions to the city of Atlanta, much of which I thought I knew, but I learned so much more. And that's always a wonderful thing when you read and much more is added to your knowledge about a particular person and their contribution. So go ahead and order your book. It is not available on Audible at this point, but it's a good read. It's a good price, $15.97. You can get it from Amazon. And if you are in Atlanta and you want to support a Black bookstore, I believe Madu Bookstore at Greenbrier has it as well. So go ahead and get that book, and we're going to go through that. And it really, to some extent, complements at least a portion of what Dr. Hopson has written about in the Black Mecca. And our plans are to have Bunny with us on Saturday, November the 27th. Our December 2021 book club selection is the Love Songs of W.E.B. Du Bois. I really initially shunned from wanting to do a book that was a part so much of Oprah's book club, because, you know, Oprah's book club is huge. But, you know, this book is just so compelling, and it does have some Atlanta connection, which is what every book that we select must have. Honoree Fanon Jeffers lived in Atlanta for a while, and the book takes place in Georgia. And as one of the reviewers said, it is an immersive journey through American history, dramatic, beautiful, written, and compulsively readable. The novel brims from page to page with grand storytelling and heart spanning 200 years. And it's an intimate look at race, feminism, love, and family, as told by a line of an unforgettable Black woman from America's South. And it focuses on a fictional African-American family. And I love any book about African-American family, family history, genealogy, roots, ancestry, connection, the whole 9 yards. So I'm excited. It's a big book. It's 800 pages. That's a lot of reading. So I know I'm going to be listening to a lot of it on Audible, if you will, as I pretend to be walking and exercising. But I am excited about this particular book. So go ahead and get that, because immediately after you finish The First Lady from the SWATs, get started with this. The proposed date for the discussion is Thursday, December 30th, because Saturday, the last Saturday of the month, is Christmas Day. And of course, the first Saturday in January is New Year's. I know you will not be on a book club meeting on those dates. So we're going to take a Thursday evening and discuss this book, whether we finished it or not. And I am going to reach out and see if I can get the author to come and to be a part. Our January 2022 book club selection is The Seminarian. Martin Luther King Jr. comes of age. It is a wonderful book that looks at Martin Luther King's years at seminary, at the Crozier Theological Seminary, and how he managed to maneuver the terrain there with mostly predominantly white students. And of course, it details the girlfriend, the white girlfriend that Dr. King had while he was in seminary. And it helps us to see a different perspective of Dr. King as well. Great book, excellent book. And go ahead and order that from Amazon. And then, of course, in February, we will discuss my good friend and brother, Rolandus R. Rice, Dr. Rice's book, Jose Williams, A Lifetime of Defiance and Protest. The book will not be available until January the 4th. And so I'll send you a reminder notice as soon as it is available to go ahead and order that. And that'll be our February discussion. We won't discuss that until the end of February. So we got some wonderful, exciting books that help us to understand better about our city called Atlanta, which brings me to our October book, The Legend of the Black Mecca, Politics and Class in the Making of Modern Atlanta by Maurice J. Hopson. Dr. Hopson is an expert in 20th century African American history, urban history, political history, Black politics in the South, oral history and ethnography, popular culture, and hip hop Atlanta, as we saw in the Black Mecca. He is assistant professor African American Studies in the College of Arts and Sciences at Georgia State University. And he is working to form a new and emerging field that he calls Black New South Studies. His book, The Legend of the Black Mecca, Myth, Maxim, and the Making of uh, of an Olympic city is forthcoming from the University of North Carolina Press. But we are so delighted to have on a Saturday where I know he has to leave here and do an activity with his son, but for him to come and share some time with us, I admire him, I respect him, and I'm so glad that he is here with us today. And so I want to present to you Dr. Hopson, and I'll ask him to come and talk about this book, his research, and then we will open it up for some questions and discussion. So, Vanishing Black Atlanta Book Club members, let's give a round of applause or a wave of your hand just to acknowledge and to receive our guest author, Dr. Hopson.
Well, Vanishing Black Atlanta, thank you so much for allowing me to come to speak with you. And Dr. Mason, again, thank you so much. So much that you have done in this city that is necessary and needed. And, you know, it's always good when you can write about your own hometown. I haven't been able to do that for my hometown just yet. It's too near and dear to my heart at this moment, and I'm trying to work some things out to be able to do that for my hometown of Selma, Alabama. But in terms of this research, I'll just give you all a little bit of this background on how I ended up studying Atlanta. I am a child born and raised on the battlefields of civil rights carrying. I was born in Jackson, Mississippi. Grew up in Selma, Alabama. I have roots in the Mississippi Delta down to the coast. I have roots in Louisiana. But I grew up in Selma, Alabama, the historic Alabama Black Belt, where people like Joanne Mance, civil rights workers Joanne Mance, were my social studies teachers, and the Reverend Dr. F.D. Reese was my principal and superintendent, and Amelia Boynton Robinson was one of my Sunday school teachers, and Gene Jackson. So I come out of a tradition to where, I've been in these civil rights hotbeds. I went to college in Birmingham, Alabama, which we all know about Birmingham. I did a master's degree in Tuscaloosa, Alabama. I moved to Tuskegee, Alabama, where Charles Gomillion was doing his work for my first teaching job. And I found love there. So my wife is from Tuskegee, Alabama. And then after finishing a PhD, I went to the University of Mississippi, which is also a hotbed where James Meredith was trying to desegregate. And it is often said that the three most greatest vestiges of white supremacy in the United States are the White House, the Capitol, and the University of Mississippi. And so now I'm here in Atlanta, Georgia. I've been here for 10 years, been back here for 10 years. And my affection with Atlanta has everything to do with the fact that I am the biggest Outkast and Goody Mob fan in the history of the world. Um, many moons ago, in 1995, Outkast was brought to Selma, Alabama, to be the headliner for the Bridge Crossing Jubilee that commemorates Bloody Sunday. It was the 30th commemoration. Outkast was the headliner. And my best friend Roderick Barge and I would ride through my hometown of Selma, Alabama, listening to rebel music. And when Outkast debuted, it really became a rallying cry for the American South. At that time, I have an older brother that had gone to Howard University. And when I would go to Washington, D.C. to visit him, you would have to choose up between East Coast and West Coast, and then Outkast and Goody Mob kind of pop off. And it was like, it was just cool to be a country boy. It was cool to be from down South. So that music spoke to me. I went on and graduated from high school, went on to college. I was a student athlete at the University of Alabama at Birmingham. I was blessed to be an all-conference, HVAC and playing college football. Graduated in 4 years with 2 degrees. And I went on to do a master's degree, and that's where I tried my hand at really trying to write something on the Dirty South. At the University of Alabama, I studied under this phenomenal Black scholar by the name of Amilcar Shabazz, who really took me on and really helped me write. But one of the things that Shabazz told me after we were done is he says to me, he says, you wrote something on the Dirty South, and that's great. He says, but you need to have, he says, whatever you do moving forward, it needs to have teeth. And the interesting thing about this is in 1996, I worked for the Olympics, made $3,500 to pay my initiation fee into Omega Psi Phi fraternity. And I would come to Atlanta as a kid to get cool sneakers. I'd go to Six Flags, and we would go to the King Center. And I bought into every aspect of Atlanta. I mean, the foolishness, the clubs, the good time, Freaknik, all of those things. But when I went to the University of Illinois to do my PhD, and studying under these renowned scholars, James Anderson and David Roediger, Outkast started talking to me. I'd gone to graduate school to do a PhD on private historically Black colleges and Black power, because by and large, private historically Black colleges are also junkets for the Black upper and middle class. But I was really interested in looking at Black power that kind of blends, working class and poor, the working class and poor. What happens is I take a class called Black Politics, Art, and Culture. The Outkast started talking to me right here. The HBCU started talking to me right here. The Olympics started talking to me right here. And of course, I love soul and funk music. And I married all of those ideas and wrote a dissertation called The Dawning of the Black New South, a geopolitical, social, and cultural history of Atlanta. That is about 30% of what you read in The Legend of the Black Mecca. Before I go into just kind of talking about this just very quickly, I named this book The Legend of the Black Mecca because, and I went toe-to-toe with the University of North Carolina Press on this. They wanted me to name the book The Myth of the Black Mecca. And I said, I cannot do that. And I told them, I said, I can't do that because, first and foremost, with a legend, there is truth, but there's also embellishment. And we have to figure out what is real and what has been embellished. And I said, if I say myth, I said, I'm Black and I live in Black Atlanta. See, that's the thing that a lot of white folks don't always understand, is that if you stand out in a particular kind of way, they think you're some kind of way, void of all of the things that Black folks engage. But they didn't understand that I go to church with Black folk. I go to the barbershop. I take my son to the barbershop. I go to the barbecue spot. We go sing and pray with the sick and shut in. So I'm not divorced from Black communities. And so I named it The Legend of the Black Mecca for that reason, that there is some truth, but we have to figure out what's going on. The book is really interesting because it's a very different take on what has been written on Atlanta before. I love this city, and I love what this city offers. And one of the things, if I'm going to continue to live in this city and have any credibility, I had to write a history that really kind of understands the tensions that we don't necessarily see on the surface. One of the things that's interesting about this is the interviews that I had to go and do with the dope dealers from the 1980s, between the Atlanta hustle, when the wars waged between the Atlanta hustlers and the Miami boys. The interviews that I had to go and do with the Black political elite. I mean, from Ambassador Young to some of the major players. I mean, the ways in which I was working with interviews done with Maynard Jackson, but also activists. Dorothy Bolden, Susie Laborde, Ethel Matthews and others in the NPUs, and then the hustlers. I mean, the work I've been able to do with Wesley Merritt and Charles Cato, all kinds of different people. And so the interesting thing about this book, and I will tell you all this, is when I wrote it, I wasn't writing it for everybody else to like it. I was writing it for Black people. And that's the most important thing to me. I am loyal to Black people. Last thing I say before we engage questions. 25 years ago this month, October 1996, I was pledged in Omega Psi Phi Fraternity Incorporated. I'd gone to college to be a medical doctor, and I was doing very well in pre-medicine, but I knew that I did not like science enough to actually go to medical school. I could do it, but I didn't like it enough. And the reason I made reference that I was pledged in Omega Psi Phi is one night they had done some real work to humble my line. We were really humbled. And God came to me and spoke to me and said, I know you think you're humbled. He says to me, he says, you're humbled now. I know you think you're supposed to be a medical doctor. He says, but you're supposed to be a historian. And if you follow the path, you'll go further than anything that you could ever imagine. And so that following Monday, it was on a Friday that happened. On that following Monday, I went to meet my academic advisor. He was an old minister, Black man by the name of Milton Hurst, Reverend Milton Hurst from Talladega College. And I say to him, Mr. Hurst, I'm here to change my major to history and politics. And he says, why? I said, well, sir, you may not understand this, but I feel like God told me to do this. I know I'm amongst good folks here, so I can tell this story how it goes. And he looked at me, and I didn't know he was a minister at the time, but he was a brown-skinned man, but he leaned back like this, and when he came back down, I could see his eyes were blue. I could see the light hit his eyes. And he said to me, he says, son, he says, God also told you that obedience was better than sacrifice, didn't he? And I said, yes, sir. And he said, son, he says, do you understand what that means? I said, I do, but I want you to tell me what it means. I wanted to hear an elder say it to me directly. He says, see, most people can't stay obedient and they'll get off the path and they'll have to sacrifice to get back in good with God. He said, if you stay the path, you'll go further than anything. On that day, I made a decision. And 25 years later, with no debt, I stand here before you all today in that decision. And the three mandates that were given to me was that I must always tell the truth. The second thing is that I must always be loyal to my people and the land that they walk on. And the third is that if I identify the problem, you must provide the solution. So that's my introduction. Please hit me with as many questions as you can bring to me.
Wow, that is phenomenal. Some things make sense, particularly your love for hip hop and Outkast. You never know how a group can and their lyrics and music can be so life changing, if you will. And so that's phenomenal to hear. The path that has led you. I'm going to open it up, but I do have a question to begin with. Your accounting, your research of Maynard's administration was not the most pleasant. I mean, you were really critical of Maynard's administration. And the things that he did accomplish and did not accomplish. And I think to some extent, the same with Andy as well. And so what I want to know is, how was it received by them? I think I remember you telling me that Andy so liked the book that he ordered tons of copies of it to share. So obviously the critical analysis and assessment that you gave hit home, but how was the book received by the family of Maynard Jackson? Because as far as I know, outside of the AJC, if you will, this was probably one of the first really critical assessments of Maynard's administration. Even where Peace Street meets Auburn Avenue didn't critically assess his administration and the work. So what was the family's response to your book, outside of Bunny?
Yeah. The family's response it has always been extremely positive. I'm fairly close to Maynard's family. And of course, if you all, were paying attention to the Maynard documentary, I was blessed to serve as the chief historian. I was the only person in the documentary that wasn't necessarily a friend or family member in a particular kind of way. But this is the thing, and I want to give you all a caveat on Maynard Jackson, right? So this is about to be, this is, I love this venue right here because I can talk honestly. So when you write a book, you have to make decisions on what goes in the book and what doesn't go in the book. All right. The stories that come outside, that come from outside of the book, I could write a million books just on the stories that didn't make the book because it's a lot that comes. But I absolutely and positively admired Maynard Jackson. I still do. Maynard Jackson is my political mentor from the grave. I go to his grave sometimes and I just sit and meditate because I understood what he was doing. And the interesting thing about Maynard Jackson is the ascendancy, his ascendancy to office. I mean, it's like Game of Thrones. Like, here you have this young man sired into an influential family who's not necessarily rich, but he feels like he has to do something. And so he decides that he's going to run for the Senate and then for vice mayor and then for mayor. And of course, you know, one of the things I talk about is in the first two, he didn't consult the Black kingmakers, so he usurped them. But then he never talked to his wife about it, his wife at the time about it. And of course, and in her mind, she's like, well, I didn't sign up for all of that. So, you know, the marriage unraveled. And of course, he married again. And Mrs. Jackson, Mrs. Valerie Jackson, all of them have copies of the book, his cousins, all of them, the family have copies of the book. And they love the book because one of the things they say is they say, you really understood what Maynard was dealing with. I really talk about in chapter 2, Maynard's ascendancy. I demonstrate how he's able to kind of usurp the Black kingmakers. And I also talk about the creation of the Black New South, which I feel is my real contribution to the field, is this conversation around the Civil Rights Act of 64 and the Voting Rights Act of 65, how that politically changes the American South and how it equips a Ronald Reagan to come in and try to really attack our people. But the thing about it is so like, Maynard was great. I mean, his affirmative action was great. I mean, the 5 things he did was police brutality, his work against crime, the annexation, the fight off of annexation, but the building of MARTA, his affirmative action, and the creation of the NPUs. I mean, this is uncharted waters for a Southern political figure, particularly at this point in time. The critiques of him were the sanitation workers and how it was perceived that he handled the Atlanta child murders. Now, the interesting thing about the perception is this. I know for a fact that every Tuesday while Maynard Jackson was in office and while Jimmy Carter was president, that Maynard Jackson would fly up to Washington, D.C. every Tuesday to beg Jimmy Carter to release the FBI to come in and do investigation. I know it for a fact, but I can't corroborate it based on what things are. So that doesn't make the book, okay? But I do know that it happened. And so Maynard's family received it very well. They were like, I remember all of this. Some of his best friends, I mean, P. Andrew Patterson, his cousins, his children. And you know, the thing about it is, an aspect of this is that these are mayors of a city in a claret red state. There's only so much that they can do politically. All right. Ambassador Young was the same way. And I'll say this to you all about Ambassador Young. He's a very close friend of mine. He's someone who, you know, if I have issues and I need to talk to an elder, I can always reach out to him and he'll respond in particular ways. And he's, you know, taking me on as one of his. But the thing about Ambassador Young that is so eye-opening is when you look at the record, the archival record, it presents Ambassador Young in a particular way. And I'm so glad that I took the time out to go and speak with him and do serious interviews with him, because it gives a different perspective than what you can see in the record. And the thing about Maynard and Ambassador Young is, again, you know, Ambassador Young is, you know, Dr. King's lieutenant, and then he's kind of thrust into, he goes into Congress, first congressman, you know, since Reconstruction. And then he's UN ambassador. And then he has a debacle with that. And then he comes back to Atlanta and how he comes into power. And it's a particular thing because I will say this to you all, even if people think that I'm critical of it, Ambassador Young was the right person to lead Atlanta when he led Atlanta because the city needed someone with a worldview because of what Ronald Reagan was doing to hurt Black people in this city. I mean, when Ambassador Young took office, Atlanta was receiving about $60 million in federal funding. During his administration, Atlanta's only receiving $9 million. So we have to understand that Ambassador Young is just not playing local politics. He's embodied aspects of international politics to make sure that this city is solvent, which is a real aspect of the Black Mecca because of Ambassador Young's usage of Nigerian oil for, the Atlanta's fleets and all kinds of things. He basically is able to bring African business to the United States and work it in a particular kind of way.
Thank you so much. And the word on the street and in the hood, and I know Dolores Turner remembers this well, that Bunny Jackson was giving Maynard hell throughout this whole time. I mean, it was widely known, that she was and I guess it's because she was not aware, and so that triggered. I can't wait for her to come so I can allude to that as well, which is why I think her following you to some extent is a good combination. Susan, unmute yourself. You have a question, and if you have a question, just raise your hand.
I do have a question, Maurice. Hi, how are you guys doing today? I actually have several questions, but I'm only gonna put in two here right now. You talk about Du Bois a lot in your book, and I was wondering, particularly about his talented tenth, basically the elite Blacks, and how certain Black people should lead Black people. Do you think that, and he saw Atlanta was embedded for that particular movement, Du Bois, and so I'm wondering, do you think Atlanta had any influence of other Blacks in other cities? That's one. In other cities, did that just cross over in the whole country, and also how do you see Atlanta now? How do you relate this to Atlanta now?
I got you. Well, listen, great questions. Both great questions. So the first question, I do discuss W.B. Du Bois. I'm a Du Boisian scholar. Not that I agree with everything that Du Bois did, but Du Bois, at the dawning of the 20th century, Du Bois had a real command on understanding that if you're going to study Black people, you must have multiple methodologies. Okay, so one of the reasons that I am not housed in a history department, I have a PhD in history, but one of the reasons I'm not housed in a history department is because I'm a historian trained in political science, sociology, and economics. So I have a much more vast variety of weapons to actually do research. And the interesting thing about that is the reason that you have to be that way in this line of work is because sometimes when you're studying Black people or other marginalized communities, the stuff is not in the archive. So you have to be able to extrapolate and get a story by using different means, whether that's demography or whatever. So the thing about it, though, is when Du Bois shows up in Atlanta in 1897, he comes because he's created a clinic. He's created a center that studied Black life. And if you go into roughly about 1945, most of the issues that dealt with Black people had to come through Atlanta in some kind of way because it was the only place in the nation that was actually studying, metrically and empirically studying, what Black life was like in a particular kind of way. So does Du Bois and Atlanta influence other people in other places? Absolutely. Educationally, Atlanta is second only to Howard University in terms of education. So I'll give you an example of what I mean. In 1910, there were 100 million citizens in the United States, of which 10 million identified as of African descent, of which 1,686 were attending college, of which 1,001 were attending Howard University. And the second place was Atlanta, which had like 122. So this is before Morehouse and Spelman were actual colleges. They were more like normal schools. And so in saying that, Atlanta is a juggernaut when we begin to talk about education, and that does bleed into Black economics with the Sweet Auburn district in some particular ways, and that also bleeds into Black political empowerment and electoral politics. And with Maynard situating himself in office being the embodiment of that, and his creation of the Bureau of Cultural Affairs, which then helps us to understand how Atlanta has now become the new Motown of the South and the Black Hollywood. So it is, yes, Du Bois does that. That's the first thing. Second thing is, how do I see Atlanta today? I love this city. This city has been so good to me in so many ways. I mean, before my wife and I moved here, we commuted. We were in a commuter marriage for 6 years. First 6 years of our marriage, we were in a commuter marriage. And Atlanta has been good to us. I mean, we had a child here, so we do have a child that is a native Georgian. I was born in Mississippi. My wife was born in Texas, and we both grew up in Alabama. We got roots in Louisiana, but we got a Georgia son, and so this means it's home for us too. But I do see a city that is struggling. I see a city that is struggling on whether or not we're going to put people first. We got issues around, we got to put people over politics. We got to put people over profit. We have to believe in a city that is, I believe in a Jesus that was born into a lower class during some harsh times. And the ways in which he was able to fight for civil and human rights was by healing people and blessing people. And so I believe that, we have to liberate. I try to use my knowledge to liberate Black people. I'm loyal to Black people. So we're at a critical crossroads. We got an election next week that's going to take place here in Atlanta, and things are wide open. But I also see a city that struggles, and I know that folks like Dr. Mason and some of you all on here are Atlanta natives, and there's been an influx of people moving into your city, calling this your city, but they don't really care about the history and politics of the city. And so I see a city that has a crisis before it, but with good leadership, I think that we can do better, and we can also really remedy a lot of the problems. I'd like to see a mayor that, someone that is going to look at these issues around, housing, the militarization of the police, blessing our schools, all kinds of different, aspects of things. But I also understand that there's a balance with business with that. So we need a skilled political figure to really kind of move us forward in a way. And we have to understand the changing demographics of what Atlanta is. It's no longer a majority Black city. And so what does that mean? How do we expand our Blackness to understand a Black Mecca? So I hope I answered your question.
Yeah, that's great, Maurice. We have challenges. We got some major challenges in our city. I'm afraid for Tuesday. I'm gonna be quite frank and honest with you, and what's going to come out of that. Brenda, and then we'll get Yvonne, and then Beverly, in that order.
Yes, thank you. First of all, I would like to thank the author for this amazing book. And I would like to know, you spoke a lot about the child murders, and the case has been reopened by Mayor Bottoms. So do you think that there's going to be any real results from that? And how long did it take you to actually write this book? Because there's so much research in it. And is there a syllabus for this book?
Well, thank you for that question. So yes, there is a syllabus for the book. Every spring, I teach a class called Atlanta and Black Popular Culture, and the class is kind of a bait class. What I do is the students think they're going to come in and study rap and all kind of stuff, and I'm like, nah, that's not what we're doing. We're actually studying public history. We're studying the city of Atlanta. Basically, I asked the students, like, what do you think Atlanta is? And they got all of these crazy notions about what it is. And then the class, we chip away at that, and we show them something different, and they respect it in a particular kind of way. But in talking about the Atlanta child murders, so full disclosure, my father was the reason I grew up in the Alabama Black Belt is my late father was a renowned scientist. He was an epidemiologist who studied sickle cell. My father was one of the early pioneers of sickle cell, and the highest concentration of sickle cell in the United States is in the Alabama Black Belt. So of course, Selma, Alabama is the Queen City. So I have no Alabama blood, but I grew up in Alabama. So it's home too. But prior to us moving to Selma, there's 6 kids in my family, but at the time there were 4 kids. The funny thing is, I saw somebody put something about the Black League. I'll talk about that in a minute because my family background is extremely diverse in a particular kind of way. The thing about it is, before we moved to Selma, my father was offered a job to be one of the chief researchers at the New Morehouse School of Medicine. And this is like this is like 1980. I'm 4 or 5 years old. And my two older brothers were at my grandparents' house in Mississippi, but my sister and I, with my mom, we had come to Atlanta when my dad was interviewing for this job. And I will never forget this. This old, frail man came out and shook my hand and talked to us. Well, I didn't know at the time, but that was Dr. Benjamin Elijah Mays. This is probably a year before he had passed away. And we had gone to eat at a restaurant, and this man had walked into this room, and he was really big and light-skinned and loud, and he shook everybody's hand like this. His name was Maynard Jackson. And it was like Jesus had walked into the room. I mean, I can remember it as plain as day. We were at a Red Lobster over by Greenbrier Mall, if you know that particular area. Well, when I was 17, Outkast dropped their album. Outkast dropped their album, Southern Playlist of Catholic Music, and they call out Maynard Jackson. They call him Crooked A. Jackson. They call him out. And I'm like, my parents' generation saw him as a hero, but my generation is talking strange about him, which let me know that there needed to be a dialogue, a generational dialogue. But this is the thing. I was talking to my father one day, and I said, Dad, you remember that time we went to Atlanta and we met that old, the old man and all that kind of stuff? He was like, yeah, that was Dr. Benjamin Mays. He said, they had offered me a job. I said, well, why didn't you take the job? Because we could have grown up in Atlanta. And he said, they were killing Black children and nothing was being done. And I'm going to say this to you all like this. See, I have older brothers. So my older brothers fit the profile of those that were targeted in the Atlanta child murders. I'm going to try to do something really quickly here. I want to show you. I want to see if I can share my screen really quickly. Yeah, there it is. I want you all to see this. You all see this image right here. That's my father. That's me. And these are my older brothers. And I'm going to stop sharing. I showed this picture because it was taken during that time. That was when we had first moved to Alabama. That's early 1980s. I remember the fact that I was really good in sports has a lot to do with the Atlanta child murders because we couldn't just play out in the streets. It had to be supervised sports. You couldn't go and do trick-or-treating like we're doing today. You had to go to the mall. Everything had to be kind of taken care of. You had to be at home before the street light, the whole nine. So I remembered the child murders, the fear that it put. And I feel like for God to allow for me to be able to tell their story and to help that case be reopened is somewhat of a godsend, because I know for a fact that the evidence that I was able to put in that book, you got to understand, the Atlanta child murders, this is the only historical piece that's ever been written on it in terms of data. And there's a lot more data than people know. There are way more victims. There's a longer period of time. It's like a 10-year period. It's more than 200 victims. And I have all of the evidence. I have evidence that the city doesn't have because I've been able to engage the defense attorneys who have been doing this research for the last 40 years. And so, yes, I do think that there's some significant things that are going to come. I had a hand in, I was a part of the Atlanta Child Murder docuseries. I served as a consulting producer and historian for the Atlanta Child Murder docuseries on HBO. Atlanta's Missing and Murdered, the Lost Children. And I do think there's something different. If we believe in justice, I think that something new is going to come about. But sometimes I question whether or not our society really believes in justice, particularly the justice of Black lives. I argue that the Atlanta child murders is a middle iteration of a public lynching, a series of public lynchings. And today's iteration is the police brutality that we're witnessing where Black and brown folk are being killed in the streets by police.
Wow, nice picture. You all looking like additions to the Jackson 5 or the lost brothers of the Jackson 5. Yvonne, unmute yourself.
Can you hear me now?
Yes. I can hear you.
Okay. Thanks so much, Dr. Hopson. And I knew I was reading a textbook, but I loved it But the thing that I wanted to say, and then I have a question at the end, was Alonzo Carr, that says, the more things change, the more they remain the same. So I know that, we're looking at racism, politics, police brutality, drugs, violence, poor people versus rich people in the economy, all through there, and the ups and downs, the way it slid through the African-American community. And as a graded baby and growing up in the Atlanta area, I lived through a lot of what you talked about Summerhill and all of the things that went on at the Atlanta University Center and everything with up to Dr. King's death and all of that. But I thank you for your book. You are an excellent scholar. So what I would like to ask you is, do you plan to continue going on, because there's, with the legend of Atlanta, because there's so much, like even with the elections next week,
Yeah.
and all of these same issues that we've been weaving in and out of through history, so that we can still get educational information about the history and the true history of Atlanta as it stands today, because it has not, to me, lost its value with people like Stacey Abrams and the new group that's moved in to change, to make things change. But like I end by saying again, the more things change, the more they remain the same, and the more we need to study ourselves. And I rebuke this thing that wants to disallow history as it is. That they're doing with us not studying Black history. So that's my thing. Are you looking into going forth with continuing the legend of Atlanta?
This is thank you so much, Ms. English, for that question. This is a hard question, and it's a spiritual question. And let me tell you all what I'm saying about this. Right now I'm at a crossroads of my career, and I have two books that will come out in 2023. One of them is not on Atlanta in any kind of way, and one of them has an Atlanta prism to it, but it's not just about Atlanta. And the reason I say I'm in this critical crossroads is because I see myself more or less as a civil rights, human rights weapon. I'm engaged and trying to use intellect to beat white supremacy at its cost. That's the one thing that I love about W.E.B. Du Bois, is he said that I will air the dirty laundry of America until they recognize where we are, because my people have been struggling. My people have suffered and died. But the thing about it is that there's so many other stories that I'd like to tell. The Alabama Black Belt, the Louisiana Low Country, the Mississippi Delta, the South Carolina, Georgia Low Country is really the most fascinating aspect of Georgia to me, actually. And I'm a Civil War scholar. I do Olympification histories. I've been to 32 Olympic cities around the world, from Sydney and Melbourne, Australia, to Tokyo. So there's a lot more that I can do. But I will say this to you all. I wrote on Southern hip hop in my first honors thesis as a senior and master's thesis, but I've always tried to get away from hip hop. I'm just not interested in doing that anymore because it's personal. And then you get a call from Andre 3000 or Killer Mike or Big Rube or Rico Wade, and they say, Mo, we got this documentary. I need you to be in it. And you be like, all right, I got you. So what I'm saying is, some of the things I've tried to get away from have pulled me back in, and it's God telling me, this is what you're supposed to be doing. And the research on Atlanta is like that. I was planning on moving on from Atlanta and doing other research, but there's so many stories right here in this city that can just be told. And it's there for the killing. And I'm a bloodhound. I can find anything in an archive. I love. Priscilla was talking about Auburn Avenue Research Library. That's my home away from home before they got, before they refurbished themselves. You got to really work hard to get in there now. But I used to hide in Auburn Avenue Library because I'm a popular professor on campus, and everybody was always trying to be at my office, and I needed to do work. So with that being said, I do plan on doing more work on Atlanta. And when I was telling you all about obedience is better than sacrifice, see, God saw fit to help me understand that the I wasn't just writing a book, or I just don't teach history. I'm a weapon. And my first major client was State Senator Barack Obama. And I went to graduate school at the University of Illinois. I crunched his numbers and he became Senator Barack Obama. And then we crunched his numbers and I ran Camp Obama in Champaign County. And then he becomes President Barack Obama. And then what happens is when he speaks in my hometown in 2015 to commemorate the 50 years of Bloody Sunday, I wrote in the entourage with President Obama. And I've been able to work as someone who gives talking points to candidates to help them understand where they are and what they do. And so when the Democratic Party came to Atlanta in 2019, just before COVID, with the debates, I was hired by the Democratic Party to explain to these presidential candidates why Black people weren't voting for them. But I didn't take them to go and talk to Ambassador Young or other folks. I took them to Bankhead and Simpson Road. And I said, I want y'all to tell them why y'all not voting for the Democratic Party. And then I looked at all the candidates, Warren and Buttigieg and Biden. And I said, this is why they're not voting for you. My goal is to bring them to the people. Let's not get with these talking heads, like bring them to the people. And the thing about it is, I think about things like that because all four of my grandparents only had a 6th grade education. My father's people were farmers. They owned a lot of land, but they were rural working class people. My mother's people were hustling in particular ways. And I'll just leave it like that. So I knew Shuby the pimp and Lump Lump. I knew all of those guys, but I also knew, Dr. Rajana, who was in my dad's lab. It's one of those things. And so the thing about it is we must fight and we must teach ourselves. I mean, if that means if we do what Dr. Mason is doing, with the Vanishing Black Atlanta, see, he's taken a maroon approach to really disseminating and discussing the issues that I may not be able to teach at Georgia State because they're cracking down on people teaching critical race theory. Well, I got enough sense not to say that I teach critical race theory, but what we have to do then is we have to create our own renegade schools. And that is something that was instilled in me by my dissertation advisor, Dr. James Anderson, who wrote the book, The Education of Blacks in the South, and talked about how Black people had to take their education into their own hands and double tax themselves because only a fool will allow their enemies to educate them. So I hope I answered your question.
Wow, that's good. Thank you. Beverly?
Good afternoon.
Go
Can
ahead,
you-
Beverly.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good afternoon, or good morning, actually. This is just so amazing. Your introduction, it actually brought a couple of tears to my eyes. It was just amazing. I think I can sit and listen to you all day long. First of all, I would just like to say that I enjoyed the book. It brought back a lot of memories, starting from when my childhood on up until my teenage years. And you did touch on a question that I needed to ask, but Brenda asked the question, so you answered that for me. But going back to my childhood, I was actually born in Johnsontown out by Buckhead.
By Buckhead, by the mall, but where the mall is.
Exactly. I grew up there. I stayed there until I was the age of 4. I left there. Well, my family left there. We moved to Carver Homes. You touched on that in your book as well. And it brought back a lot of memories. And I just wanted to say that reading your book, I learned a lot that I didn't know from, back in the day. And I think it was very, very interesting. The book is absolutely amazing. And like I said, your introduction, it just brought, tears to my eyes. And actually, like I said, I could sit and listen to you all day long.
Well, thank you. Let me say this to you all, and this is so heartfelt to me. I'm very much Black and Southern. I mean, like I'm real Black and Southern, 10 generations in. And that means something to me, which means that when you go into a new place, you got to go to the people. And you have to show yourself as being respectful. And sometimes people don't want to receive you in any kind of way because they're like, you're somebody from the outside. But I'm not trying to move back to Alabama. Nothing against Alabama, but I'm just not trying to move back. But these are the kinds of things that, see, I wanna help with the city because I can. But I wrote this book, and I'll say this to you all straight up. I can't remember writing it. It's like a stream of consciousness. And that's how I know that God had a hand in writing this book. And I also wrote a book that went against the grain. And it went against the grain, but God told me you must always tell the truth. Because now my reputation, particularly in Atlanta, amongst all people, whether it be the Black elite, the middle class, working class, poor, the hustlers, the proletariat, anybody, the lumpen proletariat, is they say he tells the truth. And so now that I've established myself, one of the things that Ambassador Young and I talk about is I'm working on a history with him about an aspect of his life, because he says, you know what to do and what to see. That's what means everything to me. But I'm not just seeking the validation of a Ambassador Young. I'm the person who I like to go to Mabel's barbecue down the street, or I like to be in those. I like to go to the barber shop, and the word on the street amongst some of the those that embody the informal economies, the underground economies of Atlanta, is to say, oh yeah, that's the professor that has the pistol. He always got a gun with him, because I would have to go into dope houses to do interviews, and I wasn't necessarily scared, but you just never know what's going to happen. So this city has been good to me, and I hope that the city sees me as someone who's an asset in a lot of different ways. So thank you.
Well, Dr. Mo, you've been so generous with your time, and I know you have some activities with your son. Do you have time for one more question?
Yeah, I may have a
Okay.
little bit more time. I found out that my son has to take a flu shot today, and so I think we have to take it at 12:15 or something like that. So
Oh,
I
okay.
got a little bit more
Okay.
time. So
Right. Let me also say it's good to see Dr. Billy Gaines, uh, another scholar, PhD in Russian. That's deep.
yeah,
Okay. And she's a Tuskegee native as well, and Booker T. Washington graduate like Dolores and so many of you. And this is just just a delight. I've never heard, but I like it. Uh, the description of Vanishing Black Atlanta. In the same vein of being a maroon, but I like it. I like that. And what we do, in that forum is to collect stories and history and personal accounts about things that we love in Atlanta. Many of us in here, um, and this is just a small segment of the book club, but many will watch it. Many of us are native Atlantans. What you wrote about, we certainly experienced and lived through, and so we can affirm, and we are taken back into those moments. I remember when Maynard was running for mayor. Maynard commanded every space that he walked into. He was big and bad, period. Okay. I especially liked the fact that he defied the old guard. It's something very daring,
yes,
uh, more about him not going to the old guard, particularly when his grandfather was a part of that old guard.
exactly.
John Wesley Dobbs, but Dobbs had died by that time. I think
Yeah.
Dobbs died in 61,
Mhm.
and that Maynard would put himself in a race without having done what we consider the proper vetting, through that. So I thought that was fascinating. Let me ask you, unless anyone else has a question, and if you do, and is that Evelyn Gilliard that I see? Lord have mercy. My dear friend Evelyn, love to you, my dear. I haven't laid eyes on you in a long time, but I'm so glad to see you. Um, Maurice, and what was the most intriguing discovery amongst many? And I know it was a whole lot, but in your research, tell us what was some of the most intriguing discoveries that you made doing your research.
Well, and Brother Skip, if I can speak to what you just
And
said.
hold on one second, please. I'm sorry to interrupt you. That looks like Dr. Jocelyn Jackson. Is that Jocelyn? My colleague from Morehouse. Mo, you have brought out all of the distinguished retired scholars today. I just want you to know that.
I'm just glad to
You
be in.
got your own fan club, man.
I'm really just glad to be in the number and brother,
Man, oh
to, to,
man.
to be on the stage with you. I mean, hey, everywhere I go, they be like, you like the new Skip Mason. I was like,
Oh,
I said,
sorry,
no,
but
I said, I'm just Maurice Hopson. I said, Skip Mason, Skip Mason. What I'm saying is that this room people always want to try to pit people against each other.
they
Room,
always want
everybody. Yeah,
That's right.
everybody can win,
And it's enough room, and it's enough subjects and topics,
right.
For everybody to do what they've been called.
And there have been times where I've been able to get into a room because of a Skip Mason. See, that's the thing. That's what we have to understand, and I hope that I can do the same. But to answer the question about when you were talking about Maynard, just really quickly about Maynard. When Maynard decided to run, I'm a member of Omega Psi Phi, and several years ago, I was in my chapter has a group meet, and I had I have a young fraternity brother who had joined the Tea Party and would try to come in and spew all kind of crazy stuff in our group meet. And I used to just shut him down. And I was just kind of like, hey, there's no way in the world you're going to get us black folks kind of be a part of the Tea Party. And this is before Trump. So now folks are really like, man, the Tea Party can go to where it needs to go. But one of the things he came in one day is he says, Dr. King was a Republican, but y'all are all Democrats. And I was like, nah, young buck, let me help you out. I said, Dr. King was born in 1929. I said he turns 18 in 1947. I said when he's able to register to vote is right after the creation of the Atlanta Negro Voters League, which was a Republican organization founded by John Wesley Dobbs and A.T. Walden. I said, but then here you have these black Republicans, which was a particular thing in 1946, and the nation is shifting from black nation is shifting from the Republican Party of Lincoln to the Democratic Party of FDR. And of course, it would be buttressed by John F. Kennedy. And I said, but what it goes to show you is that Maynard Jackson, John Wesley Dobbs' grandson, runs as a Democrat. It shows you that political arc of our people and how things change. That's the thing about history is it changes over a period of time. And we have to change how we think about it because it happens. But Dr. Mason, you asked me about one of the greatest discoveries. So this is the greatest one of all. If any of you all have been at Auburn Avenue Research Library, been around Atlanta for a long period of time, you all know my great sister, Janice White Sykes Rogers. And Janice is Mississippi folks. She know I got Mississippi blood. And so she rah. And her and Reverend Will, they've always been good people to me. And I've known her since, when she was married to Reverend Will. I know she was widowed before. So in 2007, my wife and I had gone to Sydney and Melbourne, Australia, to where I was doing a presentation on how Sydney and Melbourne, Australia were Olympified. See, when you go and look at how cities are franchised for world consumption, it's different based on where things are. So in the United States or in Europe, or United States, it has to do with race. In Australia, it has to do with race, the winners and losers. But in like Asia, it has to do with class. It's called a hukao. So the winners and losers are based on these, but it's different in different locations. So Miss White Sykes Rogers, she says to me, when you go to Australia, I want you to bring me back a book on Aboriginal folklore. So while I was there, I went and bought her this book. And I had flown 24 hours from Sydney, Australia to LA and then to Atlanta and went straight to Auburn Avenue Library, jet lag and all. I'm talking about like really jet lag. When I get in there, Miss White Sykes Rogers had this friend, this elderly man that was in the room. And like I said, I'm Southern, I was raised right. So this old man said, and tomorrow is this old man's birthday. He'll be 84 years old. He says to me, boy, they say you do history. And I said, well, yes, sir, I do. He said, you don't know nothing about no history. Boy, you ain't been living long enough. And I said, okay. He said, I was the first black man to work for the CDC. I was like, okay. He said, I went to Folk Valley. I mean, he just talking to me. He says, but when I worked at the CDC, he says, that was just my job to keep my benefits. He said, I was the number one hustler, a number runner for Wesley Merritt. And he says, I was so good that I went to the Players Ball for 25 years in a row at the Marriott Marquis. And it stopped me because if you know anything about Outkast, the name of their song, their first single was Players Ball. And they talked about this Players Ball that would take place on Christmas Day at the Ponciana or at the Marriott Marquis. But the thing about it is Outkast didn't know anything about this. They were just singing a song that sounded good. So when the man says this, jet lag and all, I pull out all of my recording equipment and I do a 5-hour interview. And he explains to me the story of Wesley Merritt. He talks about how Wesley Merritt had a best friend named Buck Benny. And if you read the book, you know what I'm talking about here. And he talked about how when Buck Benny is Dr. Benjamin Elijah Mays, and how when Benjamin Elijah Mays needed money for young people to go to Morehouse College, or when students need to go to Spelman, he would send a note to Wesley Merritt, and Wesley Merritt would put $10,000 in a number 2 paper bag, and it demonstrated like who Wesley Merritt was. And so, and some of y'all are from Atlanta, so y'all knew who he was. He lived in Summer Hill. He wore overalls, a white pressed shirt. He wore shine shoes. Well, what it did for me is it allowed for me to go and pull Wesley Merritt's record, his like record in terms of criminality. One of the interesting things that I learned about it in it was that when you pulled his record, you would see where Black political figures in Atlanta, like Leroy Johnson, would sign Wesley Merritt out of jail to go and collect the numbers, because Wesley Merritt was considered to be a hero in the community. He wasn't a violent person. But this is where it gets interesting. The thing about it is, when I go and meet with with the guy, I won't call his name, he gave me pictures, invitations of the Players Ball, the whole night. Like, so I actually have these pictures. And so I then go and talk to Rico Wade about this, of Organized Noise, Rico Wade, Sleepy Brown, and them, and Outkast, Good Amount. And they were like, yo, we had no idea. And I was like, yeah, man. So in that regard, I ended up becoming their intellectual arm and teaching them some things. But the reason it meant so much to me is when Wesley Merritt died, he was put out of business when the Georgia lottery was sanctioned due to the Olympics and all kind of different things. And it cut into his business. But he died in Vine City, England, the Bluff area, on a street where he had put streetlights before the city would bless Black communities with streetlights. And he had $9,700 in cash. And at his funeral, all of the Black politicians throughout the state of Georgia showed up at his funeral and spoke. And they called him a real jack-em-up businessman because of what he did for the community. He fed the poor. He buried the dead. He sent children to school. He was a hero. But the circumstances of white supremacy pushed him into what was deemed as illegal activity when it really isn't illegal. It's like playing the stock market or playing the lotto now. Now it's legalized. But he was deemed as a criminal when he was not. And so I felt necessary to tell that story because, as I stated before, I come from bootleggers and number runners. I know who they are and what they do. I know how they are perceived by the public, but I know what they do behind closed doors. So it was important to be able to tell that aspect of the story.
Man, I tell you, you have stirred up some memories. Listen, I can't speak for the people on this in this group, but everybody I knew played the numbers.
That's right.
Including my mama. And Dolores, you better not tell my mama I said she played the numbers, because Dolores' sister, my godmother and my aunt, I was the kid.
See, I knew you were gonna bring up my sister. Stop talking about my sister.
I was the kid at the age
I knew
of 16.
You were going there.
At the age of 16. And so they would say, Skipper, that's what they call me. I would drive them to the ice house on Bankhead, because the ice house on Bankhead was where they played the numbers. Also in Mechanicsville.
Yep.
So, hey, I would drive them, and I get $5 or $10. That was like getting $100 as a teenager, you know. Then one day I realized we go into the ice house, but we never get in the ice. It just hit me. We never get in the ice. Hold on, wait a minute, Dolores. So either we would go to the ice house, drop off something, or pick up something in a little brown paper bag. Okay. Or go over to Mechanicsville. And upstairs, I need you to pick up a package for me in a little brown paper bag, you know. So that's Rich, Wesley Merritt, Mr. Charlie Cato.
That's right.
All of those are legends
That's right.
uh,
Right.
in Atlanta. Stories of their own. You know, Merritt. You know, his daughter Melinda is a constant contributor to the Facebook page, and she shared a lot of stories. He owned the liquor stores. He owned the Ashford Street Theater, apartments on Simpson. I mean, you know, as you well know, that's another stuff. Now, Aunt Dolores, go right ahead.
People, and there are a lot of people on here who know me. Jocelyn, Camille, Evelyn Gilliard. Oh, who else is on here? Adrian, a lot of y'all on here know me. He had the nerve to say that at my sister's funeral. He told that story. So what he's saying is true. But those folk gave to a lot of people here in Atlanta. So Skip, you're telling the truth.
Yes, and I tell you, but it's a rich part of our history,
It
you
is.
know, and that's what makes, you know, us. So today I'm declaring that Maurice Hopson is an adoptive native son of Atlanta, okay? Because he knows our story. He has told the story. He is telling the story. That's why they love him at Georgia State. And that's why he is very well respected in this community as well. He is needed. You know, you need, and I want to gather Maurice and Kashif Alvarado, um, Candy Tate. I just want to do a Facebook live show on the historians because everybody's doing their own thing. You know, there's no competition, you know, between us at all. You know, I'm Atlanta historian. I'm a visual historian. I like to collect. You know, Maurice is doing the deep dive. You know, and getting down and dirt into those things that folks may not want to talk about. People who have been overlooked, you know, in the annals and the stories of Atlanta. Because if you uh, pray tell, have it told, there's only a certain few people who have helped to do anything in Atlanta, and we know better.
That's right.
We know better than that. Those of us who have been around for a long time. So I appreciate you calling those names and including them in the midst in the story. And I think that that's what makes this book so compelling. You know, that you have dealt with some of the truth. And is that Cheryl Cato? Hey, Cheryl, go right ahead.
Good morning, everyone. And I'm just applauding this young man for the information, as you said, that he shared, because so many of our leaders, for lack of a better word, I wasn't planning to speak, so I'm trying to think very quickly, who were fighting for our rights and helping Black people during this time, they didn't have the funds to necessarily do the things that were required, but they had some of these contacts that this young man spoke about, who had the resource and the revenue to fund these projects and to get a lot of our leaders out of jail for protesting for our rights. So I just want to say applaud to you for recognizing these people.
Thank you so much.
Yes, indeed.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Cheryl. Any additional questions before we close out this discussion? Again, this has been such a compelling, truthful book. It's amazing. Maynard is still, despite all of the challenges, because Maynard treaded when others had not before.
That's right.
Okay. And so there was no blueprint for a Maynard Holbrook Jackson as it relates to leading Atlanta, you know, and the city council people that came up with him. You know, Maynard was not a traditional civil rights marcher. He wasn't a part of SNCC, you know, and that kind of thing. But when you mention Maynard's name, or if I post a picture of Maynard on my Facebook page, it's like the second coming of the Messiah. You
That's
know,
right.
Atlanta loves Maynard Holbrook Jackson, period. Whatever he didn't achieve or accomplish. And the last thing, Mo, you know, well as well as anybody, that Maynard paid a hefty price
That's right.
in his career
That's right.
post being the mayor. Would you just say that, mention just a little bit about the price that he paid for this for the bold leadership that he provided and wanted to ensure that Black folks, entrepreneurs, business people, contractors got a piece of the pie?
So yeah, listen, Maynard Jackson, let me say that he paid the ultimate price for this city. I mean, Maynard Jackson died early because he loved this city so much.
Mhm.
And I will say that in front of anybody. Listen, if there was dirt to be pulled up on Maynard Jackson, I would have discovered it by now. And I'm not here to do that. Like, I ain't here to tell nobody's business, but Maynard Jackson really was a true public servant and a true champion for this city. But you know, when he becomes mayor in 1973, he realizes that only 0.03% of city contracts went to minority contractors. What Maynard Jackson does is he sets the gold standard in terms of affirmative action. So between 1973 and 1993, roughly about $10 billion come into the city. So that's between Maynard and Andy. And if 35% of 10 billion is going to Black contractors, that's $3.5 billion. So you got to understand that prompted every slickster in the Black world, whether you be from Ghana, Nigeria, Jamaica, South America, Detroit, Chicago, New York, all decided, let's go to Atlanta, Georgia. And then realized that they were going to have to compete with the people who are already in Atlanta, which had a very vibrant, you know, educated group of folks here. So they thought they were coming down on these country folks. But when Maynard did that, I mean, there were so many things. And let me bring this full circle, because you all are, if you haven't voted, and most of y'all live in Atlanta. I live in South DeKalb, but if you all live in Atlanta, you're going to vote. When Maynard Jackson did that with the contracts, and then he expanded MARTA, and he built the airport, rebuilt that airport in a particular kind of way, using 35% of city contracts and minority contractors to create the gold standard. He ticked off a lot of white folks. And one of the things that he did is in 1976, the Georgia Assembly tried to disband the city of Atlanta. And they tried to absorb it into like a kind of a county state kind of board situation. And Maynard Jackson, being smart and being able to see beyond the curve, he calls for a moratorium, because in order to do that, you have to have a 2-year moratorium, which guaranteed that he was going to win election. But had the state assembly had an opportunity to do that, they would have annexed particular cities in Atlanta that were overwhelmingly white and would have flipped the population back white, and of course would have had a white mayor. Well, as a result of that, Maynard's 35% affirmative action clause really takes money out of the pockets of these good old boys. And this is when we see the Atlanta child murders begin to take place. When Maynard makes that call, that's when you see it begin to take place. It's like 1976-ish. And the child murders end around 1985. This was kind of a thwart against Maynard. But you all are about to elect a mayor, and there's some issues. There's some conversations around corruption in Atlanta. I'm not going to go into who, what, and whatever or not, but y'all know what I'm talking. Y'all read, y'all know what time it is. And so a lot of people in Atlanta who are powerful are making decisions because the state of Georgia is still trying to take the airport away from the city of Atlanta. And that airport is the #1 generator for economics in the Southeast. That's a slap at Maynard Jackson. That's a slap at Andrew Young. I mean, y'all notice they were mad when they even put Jackson's name on the airport after Maynard passed away. And he built the airport. So in saying all of that, after he was mayor, he was my friend and brother, Dr. Akinyele Umoja, my former chair in the Department of Africana Studies, major Black studies scholar, says, don't say he was blacklisted, Maurice, say he was whitelisted. He was whitelisted here in Atlanta. He couldn't get a job, but he produced these millionaires in particular kinds of ways. And so, you know, my hope is that those that he helped will always honor and remember his name, and that Maynard Jackson get the credit that he is due.
Amen. And indeed, we thank you so much. This has been so informative. And to those of you who have joined, don't leave yet. But to those of you who have joined, thank you. To those of you who are watching in this repeat via Facebook or YouTube, we encourage you, if you have not purchased a copy of the book, get it. It is also available on Audible, which is where I listen to most of it as I was pretending to do some walking and exercising as well. It is a must have. If you're from Atlanta, you need the book. If you live in Atlanta, you need the book. If you want to come to Atlanta, you need the book. It puts a lot of things in perspective. And I have my signed and inscribed a copy, The Legend of the Black Mecca. And so, Mo, I thank you, my brother. I look forward to connecting with you when we can kind of sit and talk, have lunch or something, and just chat and catch up with each other. I appreciate you coming out, and all of you. And Dolores, thank you for inviting some of these wonderful people. But before you go, let me share with you again our um, upcoming books, just in case you missed it. And also, let me start with this picture that I cherish of me and Maynard when I was a few pounds thinner. And this was at the unveiling of my book on the history of Alpha in Atlanta. Before Maynard Jackson died, he did a farewell tour. Nobody knew. But I was president of the graduate chapter, Ada Lambda chapter, and we were having board meeting at Scholars Restaurant at Morris Brown. And when I pulled up, Maynard pulled up and got out the car, and I said, "Brother Mayor," and he said, "Brother President." I said, "You you have a meeting here?" And Scholars and Hickman. He said, "I'm coming to your meeting." And Maynard came to the board meeting that we were having and sat and just put some wonderful gems and recollections and stories. And I think probably in a couple of weeks, Maynard was dead. And so I'll always cherish that moment. Our upcoming books, and we're always looking for new members of the book club to join us. Let me share with you our upcoming books. Our November book club selection, Memoirs of a Life Well Lived, The First Lady from the Swats by Bunny Jackson Ransom. Get the book off of Amazon or Madoo. Our December book is The Love Songs of W.E.B. Du Bois. And I think Dolores mentioned that his secretary, I think it's Mrs. Omi Nixon, is still living in East Point, 101 years old. Boy, I would love to spend a moment with her. The Love Songs of W.E.B. Du Bois by Honore Fanon Jeffers. Our January book club selection, The Seminarian, Martin Luther King Jr., Comes of Age. And our February book club selection is Jose Williams, A Lifetime of Defiance and Protest by Rolandus Rice. And so we are grateful to Mo Hopson, Dr. Mo Hopson, for spending some time with us today, generous of his time in talking about the legend of the Black Mecca, politics and class, and the making of modern Atlanta. And certainly we are the better because he has shared some time with us today. You all have a good rest of the Saturday. Stay safe, get your booster, get your flu shot, and stay covered. And God willing, we'll see you again next. Yes, Yvonne, thank you. Don't go. I told you to remind me, and I'm so glad you did. I want to give Yvonne just a few minutes. Yvonne has a book out. Yvonne, would you tell us about your book, please?
Okay, it's about, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, this is, it's not a storybook or anything. It's a book on handwriting. And it's my own created style. In 1994, I did a 16-part series on WABE, teaching calligraphy. It came on every Wednesday morning, and I taught, and I had to write this. I did it. This is the book I wrote for, at that time, for the Atlanta Board of Education, and it was on Channel 30, and it was a handwritten book. I'm concerned about children and handwriting, well, everybody in handwriting, because we're using the computer, and therefore we're not using, the penmanship is fading away. So this book is totally handwritten from cover to cover. It's handwritten. by me, and it has my own style in it. And on the back of it, if you want to, it is at Barnes and Noble. It's on Amazon right now. And if you want to, just go ahead and look at it on in both those situations, Amazon and Barnes and Noble, and see if you would like to get it for your children or yourself. And throughout the book, there's a practice page with every letter. There's a practice page in it, so it's a book you can write in. Even so, I hope that you will buy it and help me out in bringing handwriting and penmanship back to the table. Thank you so much. And then there's a bio on the back about me, and I did finish ITC and Georgia State University, and I was able to work with Dr. Emoji, our author today, who Dr. Hopson mentioned, and I did work because I hold a degree in African American Studies from Atlanta, from Georgia State University as well. So thanks, and help me out.
Thank you so much for reminding me. That is so interesting. When I send out the post email with the book selections, I'll include that information also as well for people. And I understand, and that's a subject for another time, that in some schools and school systems, they're not even teaching cursive handwriting anymore, that it is a lost art. I could never imagine the fact that we would get to the point that we're not teaching cursive, but it also links hand in hand with the fact that they're not teaching music and art. And so we're not seeing a generation of children learning instruments. They posted pictures, Dolores, you shared it, of the bands in Atlanta. And if you put all of the band members together from the Atlanta Public Schools, you probably wouldn't have more than 125 total out of all of the high schools in Atlanta, when we know that back in the day, most bands had over 100 members at least. So we continue to fight the fight, and the struggle is real. Dr. Mo, thank you. Vanishing Black Atlanta Book Club members, thank you. Go in love and go in peace, and have a blessed day. This concludes our October book club discussion, The Black Mecca, Politics in Class and the Making of Modern Atlanta, by Dr. Maurice J. Hopson. Miss Dickerson, thank you, my dear. God bless you. That powerful bibliography that you did is phenomenal, and we'll reshare that again with everybody. Have a great
Thank
afternoon.
you, and you're welcome.
And thank you, everyone.
All right.
Thank you, doctors.
Thank you.
Thank you, doctors.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you. Bye-bye.